Hello and welcome back to part 3 of 4 of the Salesforce Associate Certification Exam, which we're going to be going over data model, which is going to take up 25% of the exam. So we'll be going through the bullet points once again for the exam guide found on Trailhead and talking through a few different scenarios that you might see on the exam and just really things you need to be familiar with as you begin learning the Salesforce ecosystem. So let's jump into it. First bullet point is explain the relationship between the core standard objects. So we're going to be talking about account, contact, opportunity, lead, and case. So we're going to talk about these core standard objects. There are several other standard objects, but we're going to talk about just these really very commonly used core standard objects here. So to do that, I want to try and paint a picture so that these objects are very helpful in a business sense. And so to do that, we're actually going to jump into a free developer org and walk through a lot of these explanations. So I'm going to go ahead and jump here to my free developer org that you see here on the screen, and we're going to talk through these standard core objects. So again, to review, we have accounts, contacts, leads, opportunities, and cases. So we're going to start at the very first step in this relationship model, which is going to be the account. The account is the company. The company level is where you're going to potentially house individuals who work at that company, potential deals, contracts that are housed at that company, as well as several other related. But we're going to focus on individuals that work at this company and potential deals or opportunities that work at this company. So a great way to understand the relationship is to go into the schema builder. And so I'm going to go into the setup side here, and I'm going to go into the schema builder on the setup side of Salesforce. So if I type in here, schema, it's going to have the schema builder. This is a great way to visualize how these objects relate to one another. So as it loads here, you'll notice that there is just a mess of all kinds of objects that you see here. Just all of these things all over the place, all these different wires or relationships between them. But I'm going to hit clear all, and then I'm going to go ahead and grab these 5 that I want to talk about. So I have the account, I have the case, the contact, the lead, and then the opportunity. And then we're going to see and talk a little bit about the relationship between this. Here's the opportunity. So again, the account is the company that you're trying to sell into for Sales Cloud, trying to service for Service Cloud, et cetera, et cetera. This is the company that you have in your CRM, in your database. So here we have, you'll notice here that on the account, there's a few different wires that are leading off to these other objects that I've selected. So for example, we have here on the account, we have a line going to the opportunity, and we have this line going to the contact. So what this means is that there's a relationship between these objects. And you'll notice here on the end of this that there's kind of 3 prongs at the end of this relationship, meaning that there can be multiple opportunities tied to an account and multiple contacts tied to an account. And so this is really important as you think about how companies are built, right? I have one account or one company that can have several different contacts. Multiple people can work at this company. And this is related through the account name, right? And so let me just show you what that looks like in Salesforce, right? So here I am in just normal homepage. I'm going to go to a contact, and I'm going to go to Edna Frank. And we'll see here that Edna Frank has all our information here, but we'll notice that here is the account name, which this is a lookup field to the account. So that means that I can look into the account, I can click the account name, and it's going to take me right to the account. So what I just did, what I just clicked on was the account name on the contact, which if you see here, I clicked on this field. So you'll see here that this led me to the account. This had a lookup relationship. Now talking about the opportunity has a similar relationship here. It has that field that you're able to attach to the account. So again, same thing. If I'm on an opportunity, I can click into an account right from the opportunity. Now, those are really the standard relationships for these objects, right? The account is a company. has several contacts, which are individuals, and can have several opportunities or deals, right? Say you have a subscription service, you sell a service that's a 12-month opportunity or contract. You could then, at the end of that, you could have a renewal opportunity for the next 12 months and the next 12 months. Or you could be trying to get into an account, trying to sell a company, and maybe you tried once, but it didn't work out, right? So you have a closed loss opportunity, but 6 months later, you re-engage. So maybe you have a new opportunity. So you can have multiple opportunities tied to an account through the account name lookup. Great. So we have the account, which is the company. We have individuals at the company called contacts. And we have potential sales opportunities, which are opportunities. Now, this other one that I want to talk about is the case, right? The case here, you'll see that there's several strings coming off of the case. And that is because the case is able to relate to an account as well as a contact. So you'll see here on the case, I have that account name and I have the contact name, which means that a case can be related on the company level and the individual level. So again, I'm going to jump in here and let's take a look at what that looks like. So if I'm on here, I'm going to go to the cases object. And here I have just a few cases here. And if I go on the details here on this right side, you'll notice on the details that I have the contact name going to Edna, and I have the account name as GenePoint going to the account, right? So this is how I can relate to a contact or relate to an account. Now you'll notice that the case can only have one contact or one account with this setup. And so that helps you understand this relationship here, right? That cases can have one account, can have one contact. And so that's a very common relationship that you have, is a lookup relationship where you're able to really look and see what related objects there are. Now the lookup relationship is always going to live on the object that needs that association, right? The contact or the individual needs that association to a company. And so that's going to live on the contact. So this is great to see this field that's going to live on the contact, the case, or the opportunity, right? I advise you to go into developer org and really try this out. Build a few different lookups and fill in these lookups and see how they relate to one another. Now what's great, let's take this contact for example. The contact lookup, right, for the account name is found on the contact object. But on an account, how do you see this information? And that's where we talk about related lists. So on the account, I want to be able to see what contacts are related to the account. So again, if I go back to my developer org, I'm going to go back to an account. I'm going to go to this GenePoint, and here I have related lists, and here I have that related contact of Edna. So you'll see here, I'm able to see, okay, on what contacts is GenePoint found? Well, we have it on Edna. On opportunities, what account of GenePoint is found on opportunities? We see that there's a few here. And on cases, what cases is GenePoint found as the account? Here we have a few of them. So that's how you see what related records are to an account, through the related records tab here that you're able to customize a little bit. But just to start learning Salesforce, you're able to see how we look through the schema builder, what objects are related to the account right here on the related list. Now the last core standard object I want to talk about is the lead. You'll notice here that there's no strings tied to the lead here. That's because on the lead, you're not able to, with standard functionality, tie into any of these core objects. Now, what's important here is how Salesforce differentiates a lead and a contact. A lead is a prospective buyer. We don't know a ton about them. We're trying to engage with them, but we don't know if they're a legitimate person, if they work at a legitimate business, and so we keep them as a lead, not tied to anything else. And so it's important to note that leads are not, with native and out-of-the-box functionality, tied to any other object of these 5 objects. So now that we've talked about lookup relationships and how contacts can look up to accounts, opportunities can look up to accounts, Let's talk about another thing that you're seeing here on these relationships on the schema builder, which is going to be a self relationship. You'll see here on the account, you'll notice that there is a thread going from the account to the account as well. And what this is this is a self lookup, which means that it's looking at the same object. Now on account, this is very common because an account can also have a relationship with another account. Let's say for the example, in your CRM is the company of Dell, right? Dell is a huge company across the world, and you may have the headquarters of Dell, and you may have other location-based offices of Dell. Now these smaller location-based offices will likely want to show the parent account of Dell. And so that's what a self relationship is when an object is looking at itself. And so very important, very common to see on accounts as well as on cases. Cases can also have a self relationship looking at a master case, or kind of where a case started, and then we have these smaller cases that are related to that first case. So really the lookup and the self relationship are very important for you to know going into this exam, and just to have a good foundation understanding of Salesforce. There's others down the road that you want to be familiar with, but let's focus today on lookup, self, and then this third one, which is the master detail or parent-child relationship. Now, this one is essentially a required lookup field, meaning that one object cannot exist without another object. One that's very common here is that on opportunities or deals, you can add opportunity products, right? A product cannot exist without the opportunity. And so that is a master detail. Think of it as a required lookup by the system. So that master detail relationship is very, very strongly tied between the two objects. Whereas a lookup, I can make those changes. If one record is deleted, it won't delete the other. However, in a master detail, there's a lot of strict settings. And so what I recommend you do is to go into Salesforce Developer Org and let's build a few lookup relationships as well as some master detail relationships. So I'm going to go ahead and do that just to show you kind of what that looks like, how these settings can be set on that. So I'm going to go here on the setup side, and I'm going to go into the object manager. And I'm going to go into, just to show you, let's start we'll start on the contact, just to show you a little bit of this. So here I have on the contact here, and I want to create a lookup, right? So let's start with creating that lookup relationship. And so here it's going to ask me, what object do I want to relate this contact to? So let's say I have a custom, maybe an ownership field, so I want to tie it to a user. Maybe I have a custom field that's not the record owner, maybe it's a customer success manager or a special sales rep, and I want to tie this contact to that user. So I'm going to hit next here. I'm actually going to do it. I'm going to say it's a customer success manager, right? And so it is going to tie to a user. Now there's different filters that I can put on this, right? I can make sure that the field has certain criteria, right? That I'm only able to look at certain profiles, certain roles to find that user, as well as I can make it required or optional, or a lot of different settings. So make sure you create a few lookup fields. Take a look at this. I'm gonna hit next here, and I'm gonna go ahead and put it on all my layouts here for profiles. And so that is going to be how you create a lookup field on the contact looking up to users. Now let's create a quick master detail field. What's important is that you're not able to create master detail fields on any object, particularly standard objects, right? A standard object, they typically already have their master detail relationship set if needed. But on custom objects, I can look up to a standard object, or on a custom object, I can look to another custom object as a master detail relationship. So what I've done is I've created just a simple project custom object in the object manager, and I want to create a master detail field. And so here I have the option here to create this master detail relationship. And make sure you're familiar, look through some of the settings here that it's asking you to do as you set this up. So I want to relate this project, which is a custom object, to my account. So here I have the account. I'm going to hit next here. Now, what I can do here, I can set this as, I'll set this as the account, I'll set this as the account name on this project. Now, this is where it's really important. A lot of important settings here that you need to review. So again, go into developer org, get a custom object, create a custom object, and make sure you're familiar with these settings here, such as sharing settings, whether it's read only, read write, making sure that you may be able to allow child records or this project to reparent or get to another account, and make sure that you understand just the implications of this. Again, there's more lookup filters here if you want to really filter down what you can actually add as an account from this project. But this is that master detail relationship. So a lot of good resources out there. Take a look for differences between lookup relationships and master detail relationships. It is something you'll need to be familiar with. But at the end of the day, these are how we relate objects to one another. As shown in that schema builder, how do we pair these objects? How do they relate to one another to help us with different reports, different automation, and just make sure that we tie these companies' accounts to contacts, individuals, opportunities, or to custom objects, whether it's a lookup relationship or a master detail relationship. So again, want to make sure you understand lookup relationships, master detail relationships, and self relationships. Now, custom versus standard objects. Standard objects are everything that is in Salesforce out of the box, right? So if I go into my own developer org and I go to the object manager, everything that's in there right when I open it up, that's going to be a standard object. But you can also see that here on the type here of the standard object. These are all standard objects, all right? All of them are standard. And then now we have my fun custom project that I built right there, right? When I built it, it's going to have that suffix of __C, right? Pre-standard for Salesforce. So custom objects you're able to create within your Salesforce, and then make sure you have these relationship fields to tie them to other objects. But again, standard objects are everything out of the box. There's a long list here, right? But again, we only want to really focus on those 5: account, contact, opportunity, case, and lead. We'll focus on those core 5 for this section of the exam. Next bullet point is, given a scenario, determine which feature to use to ensure data visibility. So here we want to really go over the different visibility settings and security settings. This is a very core part of being a Salesforce professional and Salesforce admin. So we're going to take a step back, and we're going to start at the most basic settings, which are going to be the org-wide default settings. From there, we're going to build up into profiles and permission sets, talk a little bit about sharing rules, and then a little bit about how roles can also affect visibility. But we want to start at the most important core part, which is the org-wide default settings. And so this is going to help you understand what data is visible to your users. So if I go here in my Salesforce org, I'm going to put in here actually sharing settings. And here it's going to pop up under security. Here's my sharing settings. And so these are my org-wide defaults, right? Here I have all of the objects listed and what access they have. So quick overview here of the different types of access that you can have. You can have public, which means anyone can see it. You can have private, which means only owners can see it. Or you have controlled by parent. So again, with these relationships, for example, contacts and accounts, right? The account is the parent to the contact. So what it's saying is that the visibility of the contact is controlled by the parent or the account. So for example, if the account is public read write, which means everyone can see, and write means everyone can edit, then that is what the contact is going to be as well. So those are the 3 kind of defaults, right? Of public, private, and controlled by parent. Now within public, we have public read, which means everyone's able to read or see. Public write, which everyone's able to edit, as well as other ones such as transfer and delete, right? You're able to transfer records or delete them, remove them out. And so these are the org-wide defaults. This is what you're able to set for all users. So if I take a look right now at what I have, talking about those very basic objects, I have the account, which is public read and write for internal. Let's not worry about external users. Let's talk about internal users, right? So that means that everyone is able to see and edit every account. Everyone can see every account and edit any account. Talking about the contact, as I mentioned, it's controlled by the parent, which means it's going to do whatever the parent is saying, which is also everyone can read and write contacts. Now we have the opportunity, which is going to be the same, public read and write. And the cases here is actually the public read, write, or transfer. So anyone can also transfer cases as well. And so that's where the baseline can be set up, is on the org-wide defaults, where you're setting up visibility and access to different objects. Now, talking about the kind of next layer, we'll talk a little bit about visibility as well as just access to records, which is on the profile and permission set level, right? Profiles can be assigned to multiple users and can also give access and edit capabilities to different types of objects. So just real quick, if I go into the profiles here, and here I am, I'm going to go to just a custom profile that I have created here. You'll notice here under the object settings that I also am able to see what objects users assigned to the custom sales profile are able to view or read or create or edit or delete. Now, profiles do talk a little bit more on kind of what they can do with data and not so much what is available to be seen. But it is a good understanding, and you'll see some scenarios on the test of best use cases of different groups of users that need access to see or work on certain records. That's going to be done with profiles. And then permission sets, I've done some other videos on that if you want to check out, of the difference between profiles and permission sets. Permission sets, very similar capabilities of profiles, but you can assign those to individual users that may be across teams, or it just doesn't make sense to make an entire profile update. So that's how profiles and permission sets can also, as you see here, give read access, different edit access to objects as a whole. So if I don't even have access to an object, I won't even see it in my Salesforce navigation bar. So that's what profiles do help. But in terms of data visibility, again, we're looking at those org-wide defaults as well as sharing settings. So if I go back into the sharing rules, now as I talk about those org-wide defaults, we talked about, as a whole, the organization, what objects are available to be seen, to be edited, are they private, are they public? And so here's, again, org-wide defaults, but if you scroll down here, you're gonna see that you're also able to use individual sharing rules to be able to give access to users certain records or to be able to see certain records. So for example, on the account sharing rules, let's pretend that the account is private. So only owners of the account are able to see these records. I'm able to also set up a new account sharing rule. So I'll put account sharing. And here is where I can select based on record owner, based on criteria, the types of people who can see this. I can set it to different roles. So if it's a sales role, I want only sales roles to use it, and I want them to be able to see records owned by their team, or public groups. You can set up public groups with specific users as part of public groups. And so sharing settings is an important place to know. Outside of the org-wide defaults, there's specific sharing rules that you can set up per object to be able to share records for different users. So just a quick recap so far, we have org-wide default. We also have the profiles and permissions, which give access to certain objects as a whole. And then we have individual sharing rules for objects. I know this is quite a lot on the sharing side. Make sure you go in, make sure you build your own rules, edit the org-wide defaults, and experiment a little bit here. Now the last piece I want to talk about are roles and the role hierarchy. So if you'll notice here on the org-wide default page, there's this column here on the far right that says grant access using hierarchies. What that means is that if I am a sales representative, that's my role in Salesforce. If I have my sales manager who's above me, that individual is able to access my records per the role hierarchy. And so just to show that, if I go in here under roles in the setup, it's going to ask me, hey, do you want to set up roles and make sure that you understand data visibility for different users? I'm going to say, yes, set up roles. And here's where you can see, okay, I have a CEO role, and here are all of these other roles that exist in Salesforce. And so under the, for example, the sales and marketing, there are these VPs, and there's even these different director channel sales, and all the way down to the sales team. So let's say that I am a sales team member. What that means is that anyone above me in the role hierarchy is able to see my records if they are private. So if, for example, the account is set as private, I can see this because I am an Eastern sales team and I own the account, but also the director of channel sales, the VP North American sales, is also able to see those records if I have that setting of grant access using hierarchies. Again, we're using the hierarchy of the company to set up the roles to then have data visibility. So again, I know this is quite a bit on the sharing. I recommend you go through roles and go through different trailheads here, trail mixes that talk about roles to get a good understanding of data visibility. That is a very important part of this test. Last bullet point is, given a scenario, determine which tool to use to ensure data integrity. So when we say data integrity, we say we want to make sure that the data is correct, it's getting filled out, and that we have some rules in place that data is actually able to be reported on because there's some standard practices. So this is a huge topic, but just for this test, a few things we want to cover are required fields versus validation rules, as well as pick lists, and maybe just a few different other field types such as numbers, currency, etc. So again, integrity is making sure that the data is accurate and that there's some mechanisms in place to make sure that it's being filled out when it should. So the first part I want to talk about is required fields versus validation rules. So something that you might see on the test is when to use which of these. So for example, if I have an opportunity and I notice that a certain data point isn't being filled in by the time an opportunity gets to stage 3, what can I do to ensure that an important data point such as the amount is being filled in by stage 3? What are we going to use? So in that scenario, to talk about the difference between a required field and a validation rule, is a required field is required on record creation. So that means that if I set a field as required, that field cannot be created without that input. So for example, if I go right now to go ahead and try and create a new, let's say a new account, you'll notice that there's these red asterisks that are found here because these are required fields. I cannot create this account without having an account name. So that is required on create. Now the scenario I gave was talking about a very specific time in which that field is required. So for example, let me just jump on an opportunity here. What I mentioned is that the amount is required by a certain stage. So for example, if I were to just exit out this amount, so there's 0 here, and I want there to be an amount before I hit this perception analysis, how do I do that? If I make it required, that doesn't make any sense because that's going to make it required when this opportunity is created. And that's where a validation rule is going to come in. A validation rule is where you can create a formula to require certain inputs based on other scenarios that you have on the record. I invite you to go through, there's lots of validation rules that you can go through and look at through Salesforce Help, a lot of different videos that you'll find on YouTube to build a few different validation rules, go through the trail mix there. But the important part is to understand the difference between a required field and a field that's required using validation rules. Again, required field is required on create. Validation rule, you can customize a little bit as to when a field is required or a certain value is required in a field. A few other tools in Salesforce that's great for data integrity are the different types of fields you can have. A big one that you're going to want to know is a pick list field. A pick list field is essentially a drop down field. So for example, I'm here on this opportunity I was just playing with. You'll notice here if I open this type, you'll notice I have this drop down arrow and it gives me a few specific fields that I can choose from. This is called a pick list field, a drop down field where the only data that I can enter is something that has been predetermined here, right? I can't just type in whatever I would like. For example, on next steps, I can type in whatever I want to type in. And I can hit save because that's an open text field. Not a lot of data integrity with text fields, but this pick list field is a list of predetermined values that I have to choose from. And so just to show you what that looks like, if I go here on the object manager, I'm going to go to the opportunity, and I'm actually going to go to that same field, which is going to be type, and show you the different pick list values here. So here I have the type pick list on the opportunity, and here are those values you saw, right? These are the only values that a user can select for this field. And so that is a pick list field. Now back on the opportunity, as I mentioned, other field types help with data integrity. For example, currency is only going to allow you to have numbers, right? So if I go into the amount field here and I try to just put in some random letters here, it's not going to let me. It's going to want it to be a set of numbers. So that's a good way of having data integrity using a currency field. Same for date fields, right? It's not an open text. I could put in the open text this same date, right? And that's great. But using a date field, I have to select from a calendar an actual date, just in case there's any data errors or typos here. So understanding how different field types can help with this. And just a quick review of different field types. If I go to the opportunity here and I go to create a new field, here you'll see this list of field and all of the descriptions that talk through what's this field actually able to do. So for example, this pick list allows users to select a value from a list you define. They can only select from the list you've built. So go through, build a few fields, and understand the different types of fields and how they help you with data integrity. Help you to control what users are inputting and when, to make sure you have those mechanisms in place. Data modeling in Salesforce is extremely important. I know this was a lot of information. I invite you to go through this video a couple times, walk through it in a developer org as you go through Schema Builder, as you build relationships, as you look at data integrity, to make sure that you are going to be acing this section of the exam. Thanks, and I'll catch you in the next one. Bye.